Here's a test that will break you. Look in the mirror for 5 minutes and ask yourself one simple question. Who am I really when nobody's watching? Most people can't last 30 seconds before looking away. Al-Ghazali discovered why this simple mirror test reveals the one truth most people spend their entire lives running from. Al-Ghazali was once a man who thought he knew himself completely. He was brilliant, successful, respected by everyone around him. He had achievements, accolades, and a reputation that preceded him wherever he went. But despite all this external validation, there was something hollow inside him, something he couldn't quite name or understand. One day, frustrated by this persistent feeling of emptiness, he decided to try something radical. He stood in front of a mirror and committed to staying there until he figured out what was wrong. Not just glancing at his reflection, but really looking, really seeing, really asking the hard questions about who he was beneath all the roles, achievements, and social masks. What happened next changed his life forever. Within minutes, he was confronted with a truth so shocking, so uncomfortable, that he almost ran from the room. He realized that the person everyone knew, the person everyone respected, the person he presented to the world, was almost entirely fake. The mirror forced him to see that he had been living as a character in a play, not as his authentic self. He had been so busy becoming who he thought he should be that he had completely lost track of who he actually was. This is why most people fail the mirror test. It's not because they're weak or dishonest. It's because the truth about who we really are is often completely different from who we pretend to be. And seeing that difference clearly is one of the most disturbing experiences a human can have. Think about your own life. How much of your personality is real, and how much is performance? How many of your opinions are actually yours, and how many did you adopt to fit in or be accepted? How many of your goals are things you genuinely want, and how many are things you think you should want? Most people have been performing for so long that they've forgotten there's a difference between their authentic self and their social self. They've been wearing masks for so many years that the mask has become fused to their face. They think the character they play is who they really are. The mirror test forces you to confront this. When you stand in front of a mirror and really look, when you ask yourself who you are when nobody's watching, when you strip away all the external validators and social roles, what's left? This question terrifies most people because the answer is often, I don't know. Al-Ghazali discovered that most people are strangers to themselves. They know their social security number better than they know their deepest values. They know their work schedule better than they know their authentic desires. They know their Netflix preferences better than they know their life purpose. This ignorance isn't accidental. Society trains us from childhood to focus outward rather than inward. We're taught to care more about what others think than what we think. We're rewarded for conformity and punished for authenticity. We learn to become who others want us to be rather than discovering who we actually are. The mirror test breaks through all of this conditioning. It forces you to confront the person behind the persona. And for most people, this is genuinely shocking. They discover that the person they thought they were doesn't actually exist. They've been living as a collection of borrowed ideas, learned behaviors, and social expectations rather than as a unique individual. Here's how Al-Ghazali's mirror test actually works. Find a time when you won't be interrupted. Stand in front of a mirror, look directly into your own eyes, and ask yourself these questions. Who am I when I'm completely alone? What do I actually believe? Not what do I think I should believe. What do I genuinely want? Not what do I think I should want. What are my real values? Not the values I've been told to have. What makes me truly happy? Not what I think should make me happy. Most people can't get through the first question without feeling intense discomfort. They start to fidget, look away, make excuses to leave. The mirror becomes a spotlight illuminating all the ways. They've been dishonest with themselves. But here's what Al-Ghazali discovered. This discomfort is not your enemy. It's your guide. The things that make you most uncomfortable to see about yourself are usually the things you most need to understand. The truths you're most afraid to face are often the truths that will set you free. The reason people fail this test isn't because they're cowards. It's because seeing yourself clearly requires admitting that much of your life has been built on false foundations. It means acknowledging that many of your relationships are based on who you pretend to be rather than who you actually are. It means recognizing that many of your achievements feel hollow because they weren't aligned with your authentic self. This realization can be devastating. Al-Ghazali described it as a kind of death. The death of the false self you've been carrying around your entire life. But he also discovered that this death is necessary for real life to begin. When you finally see yourself clearly, when you strip away all the pretense and performance, you're left with something raw but real. You're left with the actual person you are, not the person you think you should be. And this person, however flawed or confused they might be, is the only person you can build a genuine life from. Most people never reach this point because they're too attached to their false self. They've invested so much time and energy in building their persona that admitting it's not real feels like admitting their entire life has been a waste. So they keep performing, keep pretending, keep living as someone they're not. But Al-Ghazali discovered something extraordinary about people who do complete the mirror test, who do face themselves honestly. They become incredibly attractive to others, not because they're perfect, but because they're real. Authenticity is magnetic in a world full of pretense. When you stop trying to be who you think you should be and start being who you actually are, you give others permission to do the same. You create space for real relationships, real conversations, real connections. You stop attracting people who like your mask and start attracting people who like your face. The mirror test also reveals something else that most people don't expect. When you strip away all the social conditioning and borrowed ideas, when you get down to your authentic core, you often discover that you're much more interesting than the character you've been playing. The person you really are has unique perspectives, unusual interests, genuine passions that don't fit into neat social categories. The real you has quirks, contradictions, depths that the social version of you has been hiding or suppressing. Al-Ghazali found that once he stopped trying to be what others expected, he became more creative, more spontaneous, more alive. He had been so busy managing his image that he had forgotten how to actually live. But there's a warning that comes with this discovery. Once you see yourself clearly, once you taste authenticity, it becomes very difficult to go back to pretending. You'll find yourself increasingly intolerant of fake relationships, meaningless conversations, and activities that don't align with your true self. This can be lonely at first. You might lose some relationships that were based on your false self. You might find that some goals you've been pursuing feel suddenly meaningless. You might realize that some aspects of your life need to change dramatically. But Al-Ghazali discovered that this temporary loneliness is the price of admission to a much richer, more fulfilling way of living. When you live authentically, you attract authentic experiences. When you show up as your real self, life responds with real opportunities, real challenges, real growth. The mirror test isn't a one-time thing. Al-Ghazali made it a regular practice. He would return to the mirror whenever he felt himself slipping back into performance mode, whenever he caught himself caring more about others' opinions than his own truth, whenever he felt disconnected from his authentic self. Each time, the mirror would show him something new. As he grew and changed, as he peeled away more layers of conditioning and pretense, deeper truths would emerge. The person he was became clearer and more defined, not because he was becoming someone else, but because he was becoming more himself. This is what most people are afraid of. They think that if they strip away all their social masks, there won't be anything left underneath. They're terrified of discovering that they're empty, boring, or worthless without their carefully constructed persona. But Al-Ghazali found the opposite to be true. Underneath all the pretense, underneath all the borrowed ideas and learned behaviors, there's something incredibly valuable. There's a unique perspective that only you can offer. There's a way of seeing and being that's entirely your own. The tragedy is that most people die without ever discovering this authentic self. They live their entire lives as characters in other people's stories, rather than as the main character in their own story. They spend decades perfecting a performance rather than developing their actual personality. The mirror test offers a way out of this trap. It's a method for cutting through the noise and confusion, for seeing past the social conditioning and cultural programming, for meeting the person you actually are rather than the person you think you should be. But it requires courage. It requires honesty. It requires the willingness to be uncomfortable, to be vulnerable, to admit that much of what you thought was true about yourself might not be true at all. Al-Ghazali believed that this courage is the most important quality a person can develop. Not the courage to fight external enemies, but the courage to face internal truths. Not the courage to impress others, but the courage to disappoint them if necessary. Not the courage to maintain your image, but the courage to shatter it if it's keeping you from living authentically. The mirror test is simple, but it's not easy. It will show you things about yourself that you'd rather not see. It will force you to question assumptions you'd rather not examine. It will require you to make changes you'd rather not make. But for those who complete it, for those who persist through the discomfort and face themselves honestly, it offers something invaluable, the chance to live as yourself rather than as someone else's idea of who you should be. The question is, do you have the courage to find out who you really are? Do you have the strength to look in the mirror and see not just your reflection, but your truth? Most people don't. But maybe you're different. Maybe you're ready to break through the illusion and meet the person you've been hiding from your entire life.